Maybe the real mechanics were actually the friends we made along the way. What's up, everyone? It's TheJarvitar, and again, we're going on a deep dive into some aspect of the Pokemon franchise that deserves discussion. Today, we're all in on a mechanic that has been a major part of the Pokemon franchise almost since its very beginning. This mechanic has made some of the greatest and most annoying moments in the history of Pokemon. This mechanic is friendship, or happiness. Now, we're told throughout the entirety of the Pokemon anime that those trainers that love and care for their Pokemon usually end up being the strongest. We see exactly that concept play out in the first ever Pokemon games Red and Blue, when we beat our rival and we secure the title as the Pokemon League champion. Professor Oak even tells your rival, "I'm disappointed. I came when I heard you had beat the Elite Four, but when I got here you had already lost. Do you understand why you lost? You have forgotten to treat your Pokemon with trust and love. Without them, you will never become a champ again." Now, this moment definitely acts as an incredible comeuppance against your rival, who for the entirety of the game has been nothing less than a major tool. But the words, at least at that point in Pokemon's history, were completely empty. In the original games, there was no way to gauge how well you treated your Pokemon, nor any advantage in doing so. It was actually in Pokemon Yellow where we see the very beginning of this concept actually take form. In Pokemon Yellow, you're given a partner Pikachu that travels alongside you throughout your whole journey, at least if you choose to. In this way, it replicates Ash and his adventures through the anime. Just like Ash, the partner Pikachu we receive is skeptical of us. Interacting with it can give us a window into its mood. And what its mood is determined by is actually a brand new stat that was introduced specifically for Pikachu in that game. It's a happiness stat. This number can go from 0 all the way to 255. And doing various actions in the game will either increase or decrease this value. Things like using an in-game item on Pikachu, leveling it up, or using it against a gym leader all add to this stat. While fainting in battle, putting Pikachu away in the PC storage, or being traded all decrease that stat. In Pokemon Yellow, besides getting to see some cute little cutscenes with your Pikachu, there isn't really a benefit for maximizing its happiness, except that the gift Bulbasaur you can receive is dependent on your Pikachu having a high friendship. This framework acts as the basis for which the rest of the series has gone off when applying the friendship mechanic, and boy did they apply it. The following Generation 2 games, Gold and Silver, decided that they weren't going to have the friendship mechanic. It was going to be a major part of the series going forward. Starting in Gold and Silver, every single Pokemon you caught had a secret friendship value, but now there was way more value to actually leveling it up. A lot of Pokemon introduced like Togetic, Umbreon, Espeon, and Crobat were all evolutions that were entirely dependent on having a high enough friendship value. The value kept its 255 point maximum that was present in Yellow, but to evolve these Pokemon, you need to level them up once past 220. Gold and Silver also introduced new ways to level up friendship as well as subtract from it. Taking your Pokemon to go get a massage made it happier, but feeding bitter items to it brought that down. Finally, the words that Professor Oak gave to our loser of a rival at the Pokemon League that day actually meant something. Now treating your Pokemon well has some kind of consequence. Now the following generations have added to that mechanic in many different ways. We've gotten new Pokeballs like the Luxury Ball that makes leveling up friendship faster, the Soothe Bell, which is a held item that does that same effect, new Pokemon that also evolve through friendship like Swoobat in Gen 5 and Silvally in Gen 7, and moves that do damage depending on that happiness value, like Return and Frustration. In modern Pokemon games, friendship has been combined with a secondary stat, Affection, and even extends into Pokemon battles, with new battle events that can occur if your Pokemon has a high enough friendship. For example, your Pokemon may survive an attack at 1 HP saying that it toughed it out so you don't feel sad, or it can even dodge an attack saying that it moved in time with your shout. These events are essentially random once you've gotten your Pokemon's friendship really high, so there's no way to rely on them, but it definitely makes battling easier. In many modern Pokemon games, there's usually some kind of feature that allows you to interact with your Pokemon specifically and raise its affection or happiness. X and Y had Pokemon Ami, Sun and Moon had Pokemon Refresh, Sword and Shield lets you set up a camp, and Scarlet and Violet whips out the picnic tables. So that essentially brings us to today with the mechanic. In essence, it's pretty much the same as it was back in Gold and Silver. A numerical value between 0 and 255 rates how well you treat your Pokemon, and it's meant to stand in for the bond that we see take place in other forms of Pokemon media. At the beginning of the making of this video, my plan was to go and do as much research as possible concerning the Pokemon community's feelings towards the mechanic. I scoured Reddit posts, YouTube comment sections, and even old forums trying to gauge how everyone feels. Certainly the bulk of the conversation nowadays regards the in-game events present in newer titles, but even opinions on those were hard to find for me. Maybe I wasn't digging deep enough to find it, or maybe the bulk of the Pokemon community is pretty neutral towards the mechanic. And perhaps it's just entered the public consciousness as part of the game and hasn't really been explored much further beyond that. If you've got any strong feelings regarding the subject, feel free to let me know in the comments, because thinking about this really gave me the opportunity to take a step back and think about something that has been so consistent throughout this series. Out of that, I feel like I came to a conclusion. To me, this mechanic is half-baked. There is so much more that could be done with this mechanic to make it more important to the game as a whole. So I thought about some things that I would change about the current happiness/friendship mechanic in Pokemon. And all of these changes come from a similar frame of reference, the Pokemon anime. In the anime, we see time and time again, up until this most recent season, the hero Ash Ketchum overcoming odds because of the care and trust that he puts into his Pokemon. In hype moments, Ash's Pokemon have evolved, learned new moves, or kept fighting no matter what came against them. Replicating this feeling of accomplishment and hype is certainly the most important thing going into this. In the most recent additions to the mechanic, Pokemon has tried to capture that same type of feeling of hype in the heat of battle, being decided by the love and care that you and your Pokemon share. But it falls flat. Because in the natural progression of a Pokemon game, you almost certainly will completely max out your Pokemon's friendship by the end. And because of this, once you get to some of the most critical battles of the run, you're going to be dodging attacks and tanking hits that you have no right to. Given that you were really just playing the game the way you always do, these events don't feel very earned. They can get in the way of what can be a really fun and difficult battle. In my last video, I talked at length about how freaking good the Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl Elite Four is. But it doesn't feel as good because you keep getting cheap wins here and there. So as far as I'm concerned, the friendship mechanic has got to stay out of battle. So what can we do outside of battle to really make the mechanic more impactful? Well, here's my idea, and I need you all to hear me out on this. You know how really frustrating it can be to evolve the certain Pokemon that evolve with happiness? Your Riolu just doesn't seem to ever want to evolve? Well, what if we took that and applied it to every single Pokemon? Okay, wait, let me elaborate. At the moment, the vast majority of Pokemon that evolve in general do so via making it to a specific level threshold. Larvitar evolves into Pupitar at level 30, and Pupitar evolves into Tyranitar at level 55. And that's how it's been ever since those Pokemon came out over 20 years ago. Well, what if we made it that just getting to this threshold wasn't enough? I think that unless your Pokemon has some kind of minimum happiness requirement, it shouldn't evolve through level up. These evolutions are meant to stand in for the idea that as you're battling other Pokemon with your own and deepening your bond, your Pokemon can evolve to become even stronger. If your Pokemon hates you, why would it evolve in this way? Now, the number doesn't need to be crazy high, just enough to make sure that you're not leaving your Charmander out on a rock in the middle of a rainstorm. We won't forget what you did, Damien, you motherfucker! Anyway, now this change isn't meant to act as a punishment. In fact, quite the opposite. Because now I want to propose something even more radical. I think if your Pokemon has max happiness, it should be able to evolve at an earlier level. It doesn't need to be a drastic difference, maybe a couple of levels. But think about how many Pokemon problems something like this would fix. For one, it's definitely a great incentive to treat your Pokemon well. You will directly benefit. And thematically, it shows that trainers that treat their Pokemon well are more superior to other trainers. Lance the Dragon Master will no longer be seen as a game-breaking cheater with his level 50 Dragonite, but as a true Pokemon master that cared for his Pokemon so well that it evolved early. Another problem that this fixes is that of late game encounters. Black and White are really infamous for this, for where Pokemon that you get in the late game, like Pawniard or Mienfoo, don't evolve until they're around level 50. It's fine in that game, but using these Pokemon in other games can turn it into a slog, because it takes forever to evolve it. Making it so all these evolutions require high friendship would make it so you don't need to set that threshold at such a high level. You can introduce the Pokemon on whatever route at whatever point in the game, and the trainer will get the opportunity to use that base form before it evolves. God, I feel like this is such a good idea. Naturally, in an effort to prevent the trainer from chaining evolutions too easily, when a Pokemon evolves, its friendship should be reduced to a neutral value. This is meant to represent the fact that when a Pokemon evolves, it truly becomes a different Pokemon. That's the reason for when Ash's Charmander evolved, it didn't act the same. Now, stone evolutions, trait evolutions, and other item evolutions will remain the same, because we know through the anime that through using evolutionary items or trading, you can evolve a Pokemon against its will. No happiness or friendship stat will be necessary in those cases. Changing friendship to be so much more closely tied to Pokemon evolution will make the mechanic so much more valuable to the player. It will reward them for doing exactly what every good NPC in the game tells them to do. It'll make it so training Pokemon is a much more involved and dynamic process. Now, there's a whole other can of worms that we could open regarding level up movesets of Pokemon. Again, I don't want to do too much that directly impacts battle, so doing something like making your friendship stat directly impact your damage ranges would be too much. But maybe your Pokemon could get access to certain moves earlier if they had high friendship. Now, something like this could be a little too dynamic, making it hard to plan out encounters or battles, because you won't know exactly when your Pokemon will learn a move. But you gotta admit, imagine how hype it would be if your Charmeleon learned Flamethrower a little bit earlier than normal during a Nuzlocke you're running. At any rate, there are so many ways to apply this new concept. But one thing is certain, and this is especially important given that Pokemon Legends ZA is however far away. If you don't have maximum or at least really high friendship with your Pokemon, there is no way that they should be able to Mega Evolve. Boom! As far as we know from the lore, Mega Evolution is an incredibly painful process. A Pokemon would only be willing to Mega Evolve for a trainer that they have full and complete faith and trust in. Check this out. This is straight from the Pokedex for Mega Glalie. The excess energy from Mega Evolution spilled over from its mouth, breaking its jaw. It spews endless blizzards. And here's one from my GOAT Tyranitar. Though let it be known I do not rock with Mega Tyranitar. Due to the colossal power poured into it, this Pokemon's back split right open. Its destructive instincts are the only thing keeping it moving. Now, if you look at other Pokedex entries for other Mega Evolutions, you'll find similar things. Mega Evolution is not sunshine and rainbows. It actually f***ing sucks for the Pokemon involved. This is meant to show that in doing this for its trainer, your Pokemon is making a sacrifice for you. A Pokemon would only be down to Mega Evolve if it truly trusts you. With that in mind, there is no shot that you should be able to just catch a rando Pokemon and be able to Mega Evolve it. It should feel like an investment that is paid off, a journey that you and your Pokemon have gone through together. With that all in mind, I feel like there are so many things that I still have yet to touch on, but I think what I've brought up in today's video can be a good place for discussion. So make sure to head on down to the comment section and let me know how you feel about the current state of the mechanic, as well as what things you might do in order to update it, and how you feel about the points that I brought up today. And as always, if this was the type of video that you enjoyed, be sure to leave a like and subscribe for more weekly videos like this one. And I also wanted to make sure that you all knew that over on Twitch, I'm regularly streaming on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays, starting at 6 p.m. Pacific time. Be sure to stop by so we can hang out and chat about Pokemon. And if the Pokemon trading card game is something you love, be sure to check out my brother Jarchomp Collectibles if you're into that sort of thing. And with that, peace out, Pokemon trainers.